E3 is dead, long live Gamescom or something like that. But let's be real, despite being a huge success for its hometown in Germany, to the point that it is usually opened by leading politicians like Angela Merkel, Gamescom was never about big hype announcements, but about bringing the games to the people and to provide first-hand impressions, which is exactly what I'm gonna do here, so let's waste no time. New Sonic means mixed feelings. Many of us wish for a good performance by the blue blur, but he often fails to deliver. Side-scrolling has been more kind to Sonic than full-fledged 3D, and the latest 2D iteration Sonic Mania was the best game in the series. Still, there's also been pretty broken Sonic side-scrollers, such as Sonic 4. And Arcest, the developer of the new Sonic Superstars, is known for rather bland platformers like New Yoshi's Island and the disaster known as Balan Wonderworld. Now, as a Sonic veteran, I can say Superstars is not that. Physics and controls felt authentic to the old games, despite the polygonal look. Speaking of which, I'm not gonna lie, the style doesn't capture the same high energy spirit of the pixel art in Sonic Mania. At the very least, they are doing things like 3D bonus stages and chase sequences that would have been hard to replicate with sprites. But it's also the level design that exploded with inventive ideas in Sonic Mania every couple of steps, while stage elements like lianas in Superstars feel much more conventional. With the most interesting addition, apart from multiplayer, being special power-ups like flame attacks and clone summons. It is mechanically solid and also frustration-free when it comes to obstacles, despite a very zoomed-in camera. But so far it also seems safe to say that Superstars might be stale compared to Mania. Now for a more pleasant side-scrolling surprise. Despite the first trailer being released to a lot of backlash, poor music choice be damned, Prince of Persia showed a lot of promise. It feels like a clone of Metroid Dread, with an emphasis on quick 2D maneuvering, with the same kind of parrying and free aim shooting in combat, except that Prince feels even more agile than Nintendo's Samus. It's hard to say whether its Metroidvania map will be able to keep up, but the gameplay foundation feels pretty fantastic. Movement is super fluid, yet feels tight to control. While the foundation might seem like a copy of Metroid Dread, it also adds many more moves to both parkouring and fighting, so compared to Metroid, Prince of Persia could be what Neo was to Dark Souls. I would have liked to see how Sonic and Prince of Persia compare to the new Mario side-scroller, but annoyingly, Nintendo is touring with old games. Xbox did the same thing last year. This year there was Starfield, but it only featured a non-playable showcase of the intro for both press and attendees, which underlines a steady evolution of Gamescom towards being focused on community events, less so being E3 incarnate. Which made the lines for standout demos like Black Myth Wukong even longer. Even more so since the existence of the game is quite shocking, I think. The big amount of Korean and Chinese action RPGs with insane graphical splendor and unheard of gameplay was always a little suspect, ranging from what feels like typical vaporware to money laundering schemes, except for Black Myth apparently. And now that it is here, it's kinda hard to say that much about it. It's exactly what it looked like. A Souls clone with really strong graphics. At least one generation above Elden Ring or Neo. Anyway, Black Myth feels closer to Team Ninja games than FromSoft, because the combat is quicker and offers different stances. And there's a pretty satisfying dodging system that can activate slow motion like in Platinum games. While the main weapon is kind of its own thing, a shape-shifting staff that one might know from Dragon Ball. It's not only surprising that Wukong exists, and it really does look as good as the trailers, but it also feels polished and fun to play. The only minor annoyance I found is that the main character is squeaking constantly. However, it is hard to say whether the level design will be able to keep up with standards set by games that inspired it. As satisfying as the bosses seemed, there was not much beyond them in the demo. And weirdly enough, another one came from development hell in Korea. Granblue Fantasy Relink. If you told me that this game was Tales of Arise, I would have believed you. The available boss fights offered exactly what you'd expect from a modern action JRPG, spamming light and heavy attacks, and flashy special skills to activate, while characters have sassy anime banter during the spongy boss fights. When it was announced in 2016, the high quality cel shading stood out compared to the back then still relatively low budget Tales of series. But ever since, there's been so many similar anime RPGs that Granblue feels like an archetype 7 out of 10. I haven't played the original Persona 3, so it's hard to tell the differences in the new remake, Persona 3 Reload. But as someone familiar with all its sister JRPGs of the same era, I can confirm that the remake does still feel like a PS2 game, except with cleaner menus and character models, which is not a bad thing by any means. Just weird, considering that they've released the original game in HD not too long ago, and I frankly haven't seen anything that would make Reload worth buying if you just got the normal remaster a few months back. Also surprising is the new multimedia push for Sandland, a one-off manga by Akira Toriyama some decades ago. In German areas it was a gateway drug into even more weebish mangas, but I can't say that the story stuck with me. As for the game, the demo wasn't too insightful. It seems like a typical follow the marker through a semi-open world kind of deal, with a few side activities like bandit camps outside the main path. Except that combat, despite being an option, is not brawling, but mostly vehicle based, making it feel more like the old open world Mad Max game. What might become a problem is that it was pretty easy to get your vehicle stuck, especially since you can enter tight spaces with it. As a lower priced spin-off like a Dragon Gaiden deviates from the old formula more than expected, it might be going back to real-time brawling versus the upcoming turn-based Yakuza 8, but seems to have quite the different focus. The optional gambling house and its underground arena of prior games looks to be one of the main attractions now, where you can recruit and play a plethora of new characters, from favorites like Majima to no-name ninjas, while Kiryu basically becomes a superhero with Spider-Man-like lasso attacks and rocket boots and many more enemies to defeat at the same time. No, Yakuza often does not nail gameplay ideas the first time around. The sometimes crude sword combat in Like a Dragon Ishin prior this year being a prime example of that. The superhero gameplay and switching characters feel more polished than that, but I would lie if I said that it felt 100% intuitive during my first try. As Gamescom has become a huge gathering spot for indie games, few people got even close to trying most of them. So I'll just say that Pepper Grinder was really good and felt like what could have been a cult classic on GBA. I'm not a fighting game guy, so despite being pretty big titles for Gamescom, I can't really judge Mortal Kombat or Tekken. So that's it.